Hey, you're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include pyromania, parties, and control.
Wrong! What's wrong with you? What's wrong with y'all?
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you people?
Wrong! You do have to tolerate it. It's my show.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1! Spontaneous combustion. That's right. I said spontaneous combustion. It's time to get spontaneous, everybody. So, I was going to make a joke about combustion there, but then I realized I didn't have one, and I didn't want to get stuck with it. I just wanted to be vulnerable to you so that you would know what's going on with me. Here's what's going on with my 18-year-old daughter. She is deathly afraid of spontaneous combustion. She worries about it, like, what if I spontaneously combust? What am I going to do about it? And she backs it up and says, it's real. It really happens to people, Dad. And, my thought was like, well, what are you going to do about it? If it happens, then that's spontaneous. Like, you can't stop it. So she piqued my curiosity, and you get to benefit from that curiosity today. Spontaneous combustion is not real. I was going to say probably not real. I'll just state it categorically. It's not real. You don't need to worry about it. It doesn't happen. There have been moments where somebody enters a home and they see that a person was sitting in a chair and they are gone except for like part of their leg or one foot or a hand, and the chair is burnt too. And there's no other fire in the house. It's just the person and the chair they were sitting in that were burned. And so people have thought, well, they must have spontaneously combusted. And it's really not a thing. It didn't happen. All of these cases have been with morbidly obese people and or really old people who couldn't get up at all. And they were smokers or they were sitting next to a fire. And so what they think happened is, imagine like a morbidly obese elderly man. He has a hard time walking, period. And he's in a recliner. And he is smoking a cigarette and has a heart attack. And he drops the cigarette on himself. And he dies from the heart attack. And then the cigarette catches him on fire. Okay? That's one way it might happen. Another way it might happen is that the person, like I said, very overweight, can't get up. They drop the cigarette on them, and then they catch on fire. But because of their obesity, they can't put the fire out, and they die. Oh, awful. Nobody wants to think about that. Like I said, this is a podcast where we talk about things that you don't talk about in polite company. You signed up for it. I told you beforehand, and it's going to get worse. Okay, so another possibility is like, the guy's not a smoker, but he can't get up or whatever. And he's sitting next to a fire, and a spark, an ash jumps out of the fire and lands on him, catches his clothes on fire, and he is consumed by flames that way. Now, the worst part of this is this phenomenon that they call wicking. And it's just awful. You know how a wick works in a candle, right? Like you light that part and this isn't quite that kind of wicking. Let me just say that human fat is very flammable. And if you were morbidly obese and a cigarette burns you, you drop a cigarette on you, and it burns some of your clothes catch on fire a little bit, and then it burns through just enough skin to get to the fat. Well, that fat is much more flammable than your skin. And if there's a lot of fat, you kind of know where this is going, right? If there's a lot of fat and it catches some of that fat on fire, then it starts pulling in more fat to add fuel to the fire, or the flame starts seeking out more fat under the skin. And that is how somebody can be burned to a crisp sitting in a chair with nothing else around them. Another reason you need to know that spontaneous combustion isn't something you need to worry about is nobody's ever seen another person just spontaneously catch on fire. All of these people, like I said, they're all in a very particular situation. They're alone. They're in a chair that they have a hard time getting out of for whatever reason, and somebody finds them like this. You're welcome. Issue number 2, collaborate. Now, I probably just made a mistake telling you about wicking. You made a mistake in listening to me tell you about wicking. Either way, here is a great example of how you are not infallible. You make mistakes. Some of your decisions have turned out to be wrong. You know that some of your beliefs even have been wrong, or you've rethought them. You've I need to moderate that view. It's not as important as I once thought. Hopefully you recognize hopefully you're able to talk. Hopefully you recognize this about yourself. And you know it's not just true of you, it's true of everybody. And there's only a very select few of people who would say, yes, I am 100% right about everything. I've never been wrong about anything in my life. Those people are very few and far between, thankfully, because we know them as to be narcissists. But you are not a narcissist. You recognize that you're wrong about some things.
Wrong!
Well, if you are wrong about some things, how likely is it that a group of people like yourself who are wrong about some things are right about everything? Like if you get together with a group of 20 friends and you're like, hey, let's all agree on something. Here's the things we agree on. How likely is it that you've actually built a consensus that is perfect? Not likely, right? No, you had to negotiate those views, and you're all, you're people who make mistakes, and you're dominated by people who have charisma or who are, persuasive for one reason or another. You morph those views into whatever, helps you come to a consensus, but that doesn't mean the consensus is right? It's just as likely to be wrong as if any one of you had said something, right? Maybe you're able to moderate each other's views, and maybe you're able to bring some more experience into it, but the group is gonna be wrong too, right? Let's talk about political parties. Political parties, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, what each of those parties wants is they want to build a coalition that will help them win elections. They need to get at least, 48 to 51% of the vote to win any election. And to get that many people to agree with them, well, they've got to bring in a bunch of different groups. They've got to find all kinds of issues and things that people care about and say, yep, we agree with that, and we agree with that. Yep, we're going to make that our top priority. They cobble together. Cobbling is really the best way to think about how this is formed. They just grab whoever they can and they mush them all together. And some of them are really comfortable, and some of them are kind of comfortable, and some are not comfortable at all, but they prefer this to the other people. And they say, okay, now that we've got 50% of the population together, let's say what we believe in. Now, that is a terrible way to come up with the right kind of beliefs, right? You're gonna be wrong about some things if that's how you form a group of people. And it's true of the other party too. They're gonna be just as wrong. And some of these groups that are formed together into a party, they're not actually natural fits with one another. It doesn't make sense why they're together, but they just they kind of got put together for one reason or another, and they're doing their best they can with each other. Like, for example, the Republican Party is largely dominated by people who are pro-life and by people who believe in law and order. Now, these aren't necessarily exclusionary ideas, right? Like, they don't necessarily contradict one another, but they're not like natural bedfellows either, right? Like, does it make sense that the people who want the death penalty also are opposed to abortion? In some places, that's not the case at all. They're the people who are opposed to the death penalty are also the people who are opposed to abortion. The people who are, for military spending aren't necessarily the people who are pro-life. Like, I know that we've made ways in America to say, hey, this is what makes sense to us, but it's not a natural fit necessarily. And it's not the fit that happens in other countries over these same issues. So there is something that I notice happens with people, particularly when people switch from one political party to another. First, you should know that every president, when it gets closer and closer to his reelection, his or her reelection, his popularity goes up. Like, they take polls, do you approve of the president? And it's always like in the 40s. And as an election approaches, people are more and more approving of whoever the current president is. And it gets up to like 48, 49%. Now, isn't that strange? That is he doing better closer to the election? No, it's that people are having to make a choice at the election, and nobody wants to say, I'm choosing the lesser of two evils. It's just like, we do that. That might be what we're doing, and we might say it, but nobody wants to say that, right? No, you get comfortable with the person you're voting for when it comes time to vote. You said, hey, I didn't really like him, but he's doing much better and I prefer him to the alternative. So yes, I'm going to say that I approve because I'm going to vote for him. It'd be weird to say I disapprove of him and then cast a vote in favor of him, right? Like, that's cognitive dissonance. We won't settle for that in our own minds. So instead of changing our vote, we say, yeah, I do kind of like him more. Then if you switch political parties for whatever reason, like let's say that you were really committed to this one thing and that doesn't fit with your party anymore. So you switch over and now you've decided that you're going to give more votes to the other side. Well, eventually you're going to conform to the tribe. This is what we all do. We all conform to the tribe we're in. We don't like being outcasts. We want to be part of the group. We fear isolation. And if people say, hey, you'll be more accepted, you'll get more responsibilities, you'll climb in leadership. If you just say that you agree with this other person over here, even though you may not, or you might be uncomfortable, or you haven't thought about it, the more we conform ourselves to our party, the more accepted we are by the party. And I've seen this for people who were Republicans and became Democrats, and I've seen it the other way entirely, where people were Democrats and they became Republicans. And over time, they start saying, yes, I agree with everything this party says. I agree with it all. I think it's right about everything. And that is super weird. Like, no, don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your country. Don't do that to your political party. Like, you need to be an independent thinker to some degree. It's important for you. I'm not saying you can't vote for Republicans all the time. I'm not saying you can't vote for Democrats all the time. That totally might be the best option for you in every election. You might be a straight line party ticket voter. What I'm saying is, when you vote consistently for one party or another, you should be able to say, yes, I'm a Democrat, or yes, I side with the Democrats, or I side with the Republicans, but I disagree with them on this issue, or I disagree with them on these three issues, whatever it is. At least for yourself, say, I side with this party, but I think they're wrong about this one thing. Because they've got to be wrong about one thing, right? They have to be. The way they form these views is just weird. Of course, they're not right on everything. Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@therewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, therewrongpodcast.com, and help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. And I mean it, people. Share it with your friends. Come on. What's wrong? Just share it. Just say, hey, this was interesting. Or, man, this guy's a booger. I can't believe I wasted time on this. You should too. Now, it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. I was wrong.
Listener Mindy weighs in on episode 67, which was the parable of the papaya song. And she had this to say: well done, Tim. Actually, very well done. Thanks, Mindy. I appreciate that. And seriously, people, I don't want to just read like, hey, this is great, way to go. Like, go ahead and disagree with me. But, you know, if I'm just going to get positive comments, then you can expect me to read those. Issue number 3, Madness. A couple of weeks ago, there was a tragedy in Uvalde, Texas. A young man went into an elementary school and killed a number of people. And this has happened again. This happened in Sandy Hook about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And here we are again. And this is, you know, it's not like these are the only 2 mass shootings in United States history over the last 12 years. But these 2 are particularly tragic because they focused on elementary school children. And man, I don't want to talk about this. It's depressing. It's difficult. Part of the reason I don't want to talk about it is because we don't have good solutions. And even if I felt like I had a good solution for it, the problem seems insurmountable. Like, how do we get consensus on this in America? Like, whatever you think is the best solution, 50% of the country seems to be opposed to it. And so here we are living with it again. And, you know, every time this happens, The Onion runs the same headline. The only country in the world where this happens says this can't be fixed. And like, yep, like they nail it every time. Like, I don't blame them for running that headline every time. You know, there's this concept called American exceptionalism. And it's a problematic term because, like the term evangelical, it's become known as something that it wasn't intended as originally. And so it's probably best just to abandon it. But American exceptionalism wasn't a way to say, hey, America is the best at everything it does. Instead, it was a way of saying, hey, America is the exception. This kind of culture and this kind of thing doesn't happen in other parts of the world. It doesn't happen in other countries. That doesn't mean that it's the best. It doesn't mean it's, you know, right about everything. It just means this is different. You know, we're a Western culture. We seem to side with European thinking more, but we're not really a European country. We're different. And one of the ways that we are different is that we have just accepted that violence is part of our lives. And it's not okay. Like, it's really not. Like this is something that needs reformation in our culture. This will happen again, and we'll say, hey, this is how it is. And I don't want to settle for that. Now, the problem is that there is no one solution to this problem. Any kind of solution I present to you, you can find an exception. You can find a story or a different event where it wouldn't have solved that one, or it wouldn't have solved this one, or it still would have happened in this way. And it's absolutely true. There's no silver bullet. Oh, what a bad metaphor for what we need in this situation. But it's true. There is nothing, there's no one single thing that's going to unlock this and make it go away. We're going to need several things, and each one of those several things isn't going to be foolproof. They're all going to fail in some way or another. But we should still be doing them, even if they're going to fail. I'm not saying do something, do anything. I'm saying do things that will work some of the time. Now, there is this argument that I call the defeater, and both the right and the left use it for different things, and it kind of drives me crazy that they use it reflexively and don't realize that the other side uses it too, just about different things. And I spent more time on this in episode 4. I actually have a blog post describing what is the defeater that I'll link in the show notes. It's a great way to share it. It's like a 3-minute read. But the defeater is when you propose a solution and somebody says, well, that's not going to stop the problem 100% of the time. And, the two places I see it most often is if you say, hey, here's some restrictions on abortion, and somebody says, well, that's not going to stop all abortions. And with gun control, hey, here's some ideas on how to slow down gun violence in America. Well, that's not going to, there's still going to be guns. People are still going to do it. We already have laws against murder and people are still doing it. So how is this new law going to stop? You already told them not to murder people, but they did. So how is telling them not to murder people with a gun going to be different? And there is some truth in this, and that's why people use it. But it's also a shallow argument. We don't make laws with the expectation that because we wrote it down on a piece of paper, everybody's going to stop doing it. That's not what laws are for. Laws are a way to say, hey, we as a culture don't find this acceptable anymore. And if you do it, there will be consequences. And hopefully, those consequences will convince you to stop doing it. Now, as has been stated, we have laws against murder. Murder is still happening. Those laws, because they exist, didn't stop murder from happening. But because we have laws, we're able to punish people. We're able to enact consequences. We're able to keep people from hiring people to kill their spouses. And because people know that there are consequences, they stop doing it. They don't stop doing it 100% of the time. You're right. The law did not solve the problem. That's okay. You still make laws even when it doesn't 100% solve the problem. Now, there's, with American culture and American gun deaths, the vast majority of those deaths happen from handguns, and they are acts of suicide. And we have said we're okay with this. This is who we are. We're like, hey, we think guns are okay. We want people to have guns. And yep, people are dying by suicide via their own guns. That's a price we're willing to pay. There's this other issue of mass shootings where individuals go into stores or churches or schools and they commit these atrocious crimes against people they don't even know. Maybe for ideological reasons, but it seems random, and that's super scary that somebody randomly could come attack us. This is the issue that we're like, hey, people are going to die by suicide. We get it, but this unique thing needs to stop. We need ways to get this under control. And people have been studying this phenomenon, and you need to know that this is unique. This is weird. This hasn't always been the case. This has kind of happened in the last 50 years where American culture has started to form these monsters that do this kind of thing. This hasn't always been this way. We need to take a deep look into our culture, and whatever it is that's causing us and causing these people to start acting this way, This is new. This is something that's happened in the last 50 years. Part of it is what kind of guns they have, but it's not just what kind of guns they have. Like, there's something unique where individuals feel like this is the best way to express themselves. Some of this is, well, all of it is about mental illness. And some of, I think, what's happening is some mentally ill people do things that are extremely unsafe and dangerous and harmful because they see it. Like, they see it. That's how they see the world. They're like, hey, look at that big dangerous thing in front of me. People need to know that's big and dangerous. I'll show them how big and dangerous it is by acting on it. My in-laws have a swimming pool inside their house, and they're not Daddy Warbucks kind of rich. It's just a weird house setup. If you saw it, you'd be like, oh, I see why there's a pool inside this house. But they have a pool inside their house, and I remember being at like the Super Bowl party, and this elderly woman, she was really worried about this pool in the middle of the house. She's like, do people fall in? Oh my goodness, I'm so worried about somebody's going to fall in. She was having this conversation with us, and we were all like, no, nobody ever falls in. She was 8 feet away from a bathroom, and she decided she needed to go to the bathroom, and she walked all the way to the other side of the house to go to a different bathroom where she had to walk by the pool. And guess what? She fell in the pool. Like, still to this day, like, she's the only person who's ever accidentally fallen into the pool walking to the bathroom. She was worried about it, and she wanted us all to know that this was an issue. And so she acted it out and made it clear that it was an issue. I think some of that is happening with mental illness and these individuals. They're like, hey, this situation where guns are freely available and I can go get one and nobody's got security up anywhere, this seems really dangerous for society. Let me show you. The other thing is these individuals are dying by suicide. That's their intent. They're like, it's time to end my life, but I want my life to mean something. So let me take up this cause and make a big deal out of it, and then I will die by cop. And then everybody will know about this thing that I thought was important. And then my life will have had meaning. And, we look at why they're dying, and we're always grossed out about the motives. Like, no, that's not something you should have died for. But the point is that they died for something. Not that it was necessarily good. It just, they gave their life to it. Their last dying breath, in fact, was given to this thing. And we know that almost all of these individuals leak their plans to somebody. They tell somebody somewhere, hey, I'm going to do this. And it's not like just 5 minutes beforehand. Like, it's usually at least a day beforehand. They tell somebody. They let somebody, and, usually they're sympathetic figures. But they want people to know that this is going to happen. And here's one solution to the issue. It's a thing called red flag laws. We already have something very similar across the country. If you are making threats against yourself or somebody else, you can be involuntarily hospitalized for up to 3 days. Anywhere in the nation, I'm pretty sure that this is a standard across every state in the United States. And if you're making similar threats, then we should be able to say, hey, this person isn't stable enough to own a gun. And there are ways to do this where it's fair, where, a judge hears it. And if they get straightened out, if they get on medication, if they move past whatever situation is making them threatening, they can eventually get their gun back. This has been enacted in a number of states. In Florida is right-wing, right? It's in the South. Not exactly Southern. They're kind of Florida exceptionalism when it comes to Southern culture. But they've had it going for several years. Ron DeSantis, I believe, signed it into law. They've taken guns away from 8,000 plus individuals. They've stopped whatever kind of situation was going to happen. We have similar laws with restraining orders, where you're not allowed to go near your family. You're not allowed to go near your wife or your kids. because you're not safe. And I recognize that we have a constitutional right to own guns. You also have a constitutional right to free assembly. You can get together with whoever you want. But in some situations, we take that right away from somebody because they're a threat. Red flag laws make a lot of sense to me. We really should be doing it. And you will hear from people, oh, these are going to be abused, and this is just a way the government's going to take everybody's guns away from you. No, yes, it might be abused occasionally. There might be opportunities where somebody was unfairly treated. On the whole, it's going to go better for everybody. There are times where people are mistreated because of speeding laws. We still have speed limits and we still enforce them. Second thing, when you buy a massive amount of fertilizer now, you get flagged by the FBI and they investigate you. That's because Timothy McVeigh used fertilizer to blow up an entire building in Oklahoma City. If you buy body armor and you aren't a police officer or a security guard, that should be a flag. Why do you need body armor? You don't have a constitutional right to body armor, for one. Now, I'm fine with you buying it. It's a defensive thing. No problem. Go ahead and buy it. Just like fertilizer, go ahead and buy it. But somebody's going to be looking into you. Somebody's going to come ask a question. Why do you have this? And what are your plans for it? Now, maybe you have no reason to own it. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to jail. Nobody's going to take your body armor away from you. But it's kind of like the broken taillights thing with the police. Like, hey, we're going to start pulling people over for broken taillights and missing license plates, and we're going to come across some problems just by doing that. And I think a similar thing should be happening with body armor. Now, here's where I think we can really improve things in America. What you need to know is that 80% of Americans think guns should be legal. It's a very, very small minority that want to remove all guns from the entire country. You don't need to worry that's going to happen. That's not in the plans of 80% of the country. And just like abortion, 80% of the country wants some sort of regulations on it. Okay, we want it to exist, but we want some rules around it. That's the default position of the vast majority of Americans. You don't need to buy into the all or nothing debates. It kind of drives me crazy when somebody says, hey, let's do this one thing, and they're like, don't take all our guns away. Nobody said, let's take all guns away. All I said was, let's do this thing. Let's do this one thing. It's not intended to take all the guns away. There's a number of things we can do to slow down gun purchases. Age limits, for example, they're totally legal. We know they're legal. It will pass the Supreme Court if we say you can't buy this kind of gun until you're 21. Another thing that is totally legal, we know it's legal, is universal background checks. We're allowed to do this. This doesn't violate the Constitution. We tell people, hey, because of your behavior, you can't vote anymore. Voting is a right. But if you behave in a certain way, you lose that right. So let's make sure. If you want to buy a gun, let's make sure that you haven't done something that we would say, nope, you disqualify yourself. People, usually the gun rights crowd also wants, they want ID laws when voting. And okay, if it's good for voting, why isn't it good for buying a gun? Like, if we have ID laws when people vote, does that mean we're going to take everybody's right to vote away? No, that's not the argument you're making. So it's the same thing with buying guns. Let's do both of those things. It makes sense to me. And we need to stop letting the extremist run the conversation. This does not describe most gun owners in America. It does not describe most Republicans in America. but there are gun fetishists. There are people who have made guns an idol. That's how we would talk about it in terms of Christianity. These guns are your idol. You worship them. You bow down to them. You've invested way more in them than is appropriate. And we need to stop letting these people run the conversation. They don't represent the vast majority of us. Let's not give them the power. And if you are, if your politician is sending you family photos of themselves and everybody's got guns, you should know that's kind of gross. They're confessing something about themselves that's not good. And even if you like guns and you want to own a gun, you need to recognize that they've got a different priority on it than they should. And one way that we can keep extremists from running this conversation is to change how we choose who is representing each party. Our primary system didn't always used to be this way. Right now, it favors the extremist. It favors people who are really invested in politics. And that would be me. I'm one of those people. People who are really invested in politics and keep abreast of everything that's happening and know who's running and show up and vote every time. These people tend to be extremists. And they're very animated and they want to get out the vote, and that gives them more power than is due. And they put in people who are more similar to them, who are less moderate. And if we had more moderate Republicans and more moderate Democrats, there would be more working together on things that seem difficult to fix. One way I think would be great in fixing the primary system is something called ranked choice voting. And they're doing this in Alaska, and I believe they're doing it in Maine as well, and more of us need to be doing it. We're in states that gives us the opportunity to experiment, and let's do it. Let's have more states experiment with something like ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is where you go in and you say, all right, I have 5 candidates here, and I don't like pineapple on a pizza, so that's going to be my 5th vote. I like ham okay, but not my favorite, so I'm going to make that my 4th vote. Cheese pizza, that's pretty plain, but I would eat it if it was offered to me. Sausage I like, but not as much as pepperoni. So pepperoni is going to be my 1st vote, and sausage is going to be my 2nd vote. And if pepperoni doesn't win, then I get sausage. And if sausage doesn't win, then I get cheese. And if cheese doesn't win, I get ham. And then it's left between a vote between ham or pineapple. And guess what's going to win between ham and pineapple? Even if people are really enthusiastic about pineapple on their pizza. 40% of the country really wants to go out and eat up all the pineapple on pizza. And they'll put all their money into it, and they will churn up all the support they can for the pineapple vote. Well, they only get 1 vote per person. And the other 60% of us are going to say, nope, we're stopping at ham. We'll take the ham, but we will not take the pineapple. And this seems like a much better way to vote. It's democracy is kind of a new thing, and it's okay if we make some adjustments to it. But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know, and let me know why. I had fun, and I hope you did too. Bye-bye.